Tanya, I was talking with Bruce Shapiro about the organic food movement in the United States, where people are now wanting to raise and consume their food locally rather than trucking it across the country. Now, there's a bit of a parallel here because we're talking about the Hillsong-style churches, which are huge, physically huge, in Melbourne, Adelaide, Perth, all over the place. But there are also attempts, of course, to have Pentecostal churches in more isolated areas. But these are not big outfits, are they?
No, they're much smaller. The things that you will see at Hillsong on the level of that magnitude, you're not going to see in the other 1,000 Assemblies of God or 1,100 Assemblies of God churches in rural areas in Australia. And
so, 50 or 60 people would go along and...
Yeah, back to the traditional model of a small church with, some small local community families joining in and, burning the candle at both ends.
Philip, a couple of weeks ago I was filming a sequence about my childhood for Talking Heads, which is an ABC TV production, and I was sitting in a surviving congregational church up here in Sydney, one of the very few that wasn't gobbled up by the Uniting. And there was a lovely minister who reminded me so much of childhood, and he said very proudly that the congregation had doubled in size, but when he'd taken over it only had 13, so it wasn't a huge it wasn't a quantum leap. What's happening in Uniting churches? Are you holding your audience, as it were, or is there a long steady decline?
No, there's a long, steady decline, and numbers are falling. Certainly the congregations overall, looking across Australia overall, are elderly, and hence we do expect further decline.
What are you doing about it, Philip, as a collective? Just worrying, acquiescing, surrendering, praying? What's going on?
I think there are some things that are happening, that people are trying new things. I think that part of it has been to look at different forms of spirituality and the expression of them. Some people are moving more into the meditation. Other people are looking at the arts as a focus for inspiration.
Some people also are sort of wandering around the net, aren't they, trying to find little spiritual boutiques in the ether.
Yes, and I suspect that that's the way the culture's moving, in a sense, that we're becoming more individualised in the spirituality that we look for.
Tanya, one of the things that absolutely astonished me some years ago, we were doing a program on the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, who, as you know, are very fundamentalist in their interpretation of the Bible. But it turned out, shock horror, that they had a very progressive attitude within the KKK towards women. They hated black people, they hated Jews, but in terms of their attitude to women, there was a remarkable degree of equity. How does the Pentecostal church treat women? Are they allowed to get up to become senior figures?
They are, in theory. You will not find many senior pastors that are female, if you'll find any at all. Women are very happy to take their place in the Pentecostal church as a submissive, obedient wife.
That's one of the things you wouldn't have liked. I get the feeling you would have been quite impatient with that.
Yeah, I'm not very good with submission, unless I'm in the mood for it. It's very difficult if you show resistance to the system. It becomes very difficult, be it, on a feminist level or on any kind of level.
Tanya, I understand that Hillsong have a Sponsor a Child program in Uganda. What else do they do that one could look at with at least a diagonal nod?
A diagonal nod. Hillsong go a long way to promote their own charitable endeavours. I guess the part that a lot of people miss is that the funding for those endeavours is raised separately from the other monies that are raised by Hillsong. So whereas they might be giving, as they advertised, $700,000 to the Ugandan children in the orphanage, that's money that's been raised above and beyond the usual, tithes and offerings of the week.
What happens with uniting church cash flow, such as it is, Philip? Where does it head? Is it put to good works around Australia and the wider world?
Well, certainly quite a reasonable percentage of it is. I don't know the breakdown. I do know that each church contributes a certain proportion of its money into centralised funds, and some of that is used in social justice, some of it's used in welfare-type activities. And also, individual churches will spend some of their money in a whole range of welfare, social justice work and so on.
Tanya, I've got quite a good friend who runs a very big Pentecostal church in WA, and he invited me to go along and talk to he and all his mates, and I have to say they're all women, they're all blokes, and I describe myself as a lion in a den of Christians, a toothless, mangy lion in a den of Christians, and I put to them some of the arguments I'd put here tonight, that the equation between Pentecostal and conservative was unhealthy, etc., etc. But I also made the point that they, at that time when I was talking to them, hadn't realised their potential political power in the way that the Pentecostal movement has in the United States. And I'm told that shortly after I left the meeting, they said, well, he's right, and they got together and decided to form family first. So
thank you.
They're starting to flex, the Pentecostals are starting to flex their muscles directly in politics.
However, I guess Hillsong has shied away from, for 2 years in a row, they have not invited any politicians to their conferences, because I guess they're getting an awareness of, the scrutiny that they're under. But certainly fundamentalism is a very political movement.
I find the lack of doubt in anyone on anything quite weird. To me, doubt is just a part of the whole human and indeed intellectual process. You had increasing doubt. Did it tear you apart?
Absolutely, yeah. It ripped me into shreds in the end, and this is why this story is such a long time coming.
And you've written it for therapy?
No,
or for vengeance, or for...
Please. No, I've written it because that book didn't exist when I was going through what I was going through. I felt very alone in my doubts and my confusion, and, unless you were a part of a cult with whips and chains, you got no attention at all.
Well, that's a very good reason for writing a book, aiming it at the lonely and making them realise that what they're experiencing, and this can be a young person discovering that they're an atheist.
Sure.
Can feel desperately alone,
Absolutely.
as I did when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So you discover a book by Bertrand Russell, or in the other case by Tanya Levin, and you suddenly feel reassured.
Well, yeah, it turns out that the more research that I did and the more time I spent with people who'd been negatively affected by the Assemblies of God Church, the more I realised how common my story was, just that nobody was really prepared to talk about it.
Philip, are you, as a minister of the Uniting Church, are you feeling desolated by the future you see for conventional Christianity? Or are you reconciled to it? Do you just accept that things change?
Certainly, to some extent, I think disappointed in some aspects, reconciled in others. Behind the changes, one wonders to what extent people are losing a sense of community, and whether the sort of the networking generation is really adequately replacing that sense of community.
Well, let's ask Tanya. You've lost that community. Do you miss that intense community, or are you happier going solo?
Oh, at times I get nostalgic, but I guess that's it. I've gained much more than I've lost, is all I know.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that, Tanya. Tanya Levin, author, former member of, Hillsong Church, people in glass houses, and inside the story of life in and out of Hillsong. It's published by Black Ink, who are, of course, a very brave and creative publishing house.
Amen.
My other guest, Philip Hughes, Senior Researcher at the Christian Research Association,